procrastinating. Pretty much packed, ready to go to school. In about, we're going to head off in about 5 hours, 8 o'clock. Um, but we couldn't finish this 2022 summer arc without completing Cynicism, right? We are there at the finish line. So I guess what better way to end the summer than to end our summer read. So without further ado, let's put an end to this chapter. Now shall we? Okay. Here's the coda. Chapter 8. The inevitability of cynicism. As a result of recent scholarly interest in the phenomenon of cynicism, there is a growing list of so-called inheritors of cynic philosophy, those identified as owing something to cynicism. In the pre-modern sense, range from comedians and satirists to tricksters, street artists, and political activists such as Russian punk collective Pussy Riot. To this list, we might add the case of Pryder Pavlinsky, who sewed his mouth shut in protest against the incarceration of members of Pussy Riot in 2012, had brought himself naked and wrapped in barbed wire to the main entrance of the Legislative Assembly of St. Petersburg in 2013, and later that year nailed his scrotum to Red Square, cut off his earlobe while sitting naked on the roof of the prominent psychiatric hospital in 2014. And after having receiving asylum in France in 2017, set fire to the entrance of the Bank of France in Paris. Jeez, I want to look at a picture of this guy. Jesus Christ. I understand you want to make a point, but that is a lot. Brighter. Yeah, he's an artist. Makes sense. I mean, he looks cool. Actually, I mean, he does look cool. You know, I will say that. I mean, most Russian people look cool. Jesus Christ. Wow. No, it's actually him. And I nailed my scrotum to the red square. How's this guy not, like, been killed by the government? Dang, bruh. Oh. This stuff is, like, hard, bruh. Man, the whole barbed wire stuff, bro. Hey, that's crazy. I guess people really about this. People really about that. Okay. Several parallels with cynic protests might be drawn. Pavlinsky's public nakedness, his shamelessness before that public, the high levels of endurance and self-control required in acts of public self-mutilation, his use of body to manifest its truth, his desire to remain in Athens, so to speak, his commitment to suck the authorities into his art, willing the state to involve itself, extricate him and incarcerate him so that it may become an active, if involuntary, participant in the production of his art. His tactical co-option of the instruments of state power, the media, state propaganda, and psychiatry, for instance, to transmit, reflect, and amplify his message, where the basic facts cannot be distorted. His adoption, embodiment, and intensification of the oppressions he identifies, his claims to travel beyond those oppressions by way of them. On a lower key, his attitude towards education, his rejection of all forms of servitude, his determination to puncture the apathy, political indifference, and fatalism of modern Russian society. And finally, in the case of the Bank of France, the ingratitude of the cynic in exile to host society. The parallels are stark. They suggest that cynicism might yet have a role within contemporary society, though we should exercise caution when placing political activists and performance artists of such distinction and uniqueness with a cynic framework if that cynicism is not self professed. Hmm. Various modern literary figures and musicians have also been studied in light of their apparent ancient modern cynicism, too numerous to be considered here. The sheer number of range of writers and musicians identified presents its own problem, however. By some estimations, almost anyone who does their own thing might be considered a cynic. Anarchists, tramps, hobos, beats, hippies, punks, new agers, bohemians, the catalog goes on. Though individual studies may avoid such broad generalizations, outlining their own conceptions of cynicism with a considerable care, for a tradition as diverse and multifaceted as cynicism, the overall list of authors, musicians, street artists, performance artists, protesters, and activists who may or may not owe something to ancient modern cynicism is likely to become a long one. Mm. This may well be fertile ground for the future research, but it is worth noting that most of these named and studied referred to above do not self identify as cynics. Though this book has limited its analysis of the history of cynicism to case of direct or indirect reference to the cynics. Oh, James. Hello, dude. It's probably like 12 hours or 8 hours. It's probably like 11 or like lunchtime for you, right? Maybe? Is it lunchtime for you right now? Um, Let me know. I'm curious. Um, yeah, let's continue. Um, let's see. An approach that may well have prevented a broader understanding of the legacy of ancient Cynic philosophy and the practices it inspired. This line of argument does not retain in view of the awkward question of what a self avowed cynicism might look like today. It raises the problem of what a more deliberate cynicism might do, one that self consciously draws from and seeks to intensify contemporary cynic traits and dispositions that are widespread but largely disavowed or dismissed. This would be an attempt to push modern cynicism to realize and bring to fruition its own embedded but as yet underdeveloped. Oh, airport time. Okay. Underdeveloped negativity. Given the endurance of earlier cynicisms in later period, this adoption and intensification of modern cynic traits might be accompanied by the selective mimesis and further adaptation of ancient cynic technique, though with the caveat that any appeal to older logics of transgressions cannot return to the exact practices of ancient cynicism. So man, I really wish I could have caught you, James, before you left to London, to the UK, say goodbye. But man, just having you here on the stream really means a lot to me. Um, it's like you're here with me reading this book, you know. No, but I was really, really fortunate and very grateful that I was able to see you at least once this summer because you were genuinely such an amazing person and such a great individual to be around because you have such you have a cadence that is unique to you, and to be able to experience that and to be able to be around that is what I'd consider a privilege. So, thank you for being here, and yeah, I guess I'll continue. On this point, due to attention to the improvised and contextually dependent nature of ancient cynicism will ensure that attempts to learn from cynicism are not reduced to straightforward exercises in mimicry. To take an obvious example, shitting before an audience will no longer have the same effect. In part, this is because audiences have changed. They were essential to the cynic practice. Diogenes, who needed a very few things, nevertheless needed a crowd. But audiences gather differently now. Shameless cynic acts performed by quarrelsome figures capable of reacting in an uncivil way to the spectacle of false living, will find themselves received in part in a virtual context. In this setting, the rules of audience per participation are altered, the specters defining themselves online and at a distance by the indignation they express as they suck through teeth between successive tweets, writing below the line, righteous indignation conceived as a reflex arc, intemperate but cursory reactions left as online traces. These are a function of the form. Unbridled anger has become a banal feature of online existence. The internet thrives on bad sentiment. Even rage directed against its main service providers will, if registered online, generate further revenue for the likes of Facebook, Twitter, and on Google. If the cynic causes a stir via social media, there is no marker of a cynic transgression. The visceral discomfort of a live audience gathered before the defecating cynic has been replaced by a virtual audience that turns indignation into profit. It is still worth taking up Sodric's invitation to imagine a return to Diogenes climbing out of his Athenian tub into recent history, if only to measure the distance between this time and our own. While Diogenes had taught, "Be ready for anything," what he finds in our present seems beyond the grasp of cynic subversion. It appears that, in this very different context, acts of cynic shamelessness no longer suffices to challenge social norms. All such perversions have been subsumed by psychologies that presume to treat them. Yes, psychologies. There is an even so-called Diogenes syndrome, which has to be the most ridiculous co-option of the name of cynicism so far recounted in the pathologicalization of domestic squalor in the name of order and cleanliness. Given the mutual reinforcing development of psychiatry and carceral society, shameless acts of cynic perversion, designed to call into question the very values that animate the scandalized, might only reinforce those very institutions that seek to normalize behavior by constituting abnormalities as sufficient reason for remedial action. The cynic would be locked up, medicated, and worst of all, understood. Oh, no, I can't wait for the pajama party, James. That's going to be so cool. I'm very much excited to show up to that and hear you guys jam. Like, I'm kind of bummed I missed you guys' performance. I'm happy I caught you though at Chase's, but no, first performance I'll be seeing, and I'm really looking forward to it, man. I'm really looking forward to it. Man, I'm gonna have to wake up early tomorrow, man. I'll sleep in the car, but you know, uh, yeah, yeah. Going back to school, man. I'm not sure how I feel about that, dude. It's gonna be. I mean, I kind of doesn't matter what I feel. It's gonna happen. Oh, but I guess since I have you here, James, the quintessential movie is coming to Blu-ray soon, which means that it will be arriving on pirating sites. I mean, I'd love to wait to see if it gets released in theaters, and if it does, you best believe that I'm coming down and we are gonna watch it. Invite Andrew, the whole posse, for smoking inside initially began out of I don't know. I just need to see that in theaters. But if it's not coming to theaters, then I'll just watch it on my computer or something. But I just need to. That's the bow on top. You know, that movie is the missing puzzle piece in this quintessential journey that I've seemingly completed almost a year ago now. But you know, the anime still needs its conclusion for me. The modus operandi of Agent Cynic, to live differently, must also face its inevitable adoption by capital. Here the legacy of May 1868 serves as a useful reminder of how attempts to reinvent daily life cannot be outmaneuvered. Everyday existence, as its critics claim, is now relentlessly exploited by capital. Workers and educational subjects are expected to take upon themselves a stylization. Oh, I head back to school tomorrow morning. I'm leaving at 8. Wake up probably at 7:15. We'll see. Um, of life that will render them permanently adaptable to whims of the marketplace. Individual lives are framed increasingly in this way, folded back on themselves as lives of stylization, visa vis, the civil, the oh yeah, the cultivation of cultural taste, body image, and so forth. When social problems are confronted, uncomfortable political questions are suspended in the name of ethical immediacy. For instance, since the first Live Aid concert in 1985, a specific form of ideological blackmail has taken root, insisting that caring individuals can end famine directly by collectively reaching into their pockets without the need for systematic reorganization. It's actually kind of facts. I mean, should today's cynics manage to avoid pathologicalization or arrest for indecency, his or her embodied practices would be perceived as another lifestyle choice or political statement, another exhibitionist operating within the boundaries of liberal acceptability, even the joyful exuberance, uh, exuberance of the cynic may be co-opted. If we accept that the hegemotic model of late capitalism is no longer patriarchal in kind, that is easy to say, modeled after the Oedipial father who prohibits enjoyment, but is modeled on the obscene primordial father, the master of enjoyment, who transforms the impulse to enjoyment into repressive injunction. The space of enjoyment is occupied by power, a power that insists its subjects gratify themselves. Absolute gratification is always withheld, of course, or placed just beyond reach, promised in each consumer good, a life experience sold to its customers in order to develop a thirst rather than satisfy it. Given all the above, a form of cynicism modeled on its ancient ancestor would clearly struggle. Its strategies no longer able to take effect, outmaneuvered by political context that is permissive and even welcoming deviance, or punitive by largely unshockable. Deviance has become liable to power. It has been given its place. Any revival of cynic philosophy will face a number of challenges then and cannot be modeled on ancient cynicism without considerable tactical adjustment. Here, the cynic commitment to a straight life outlined by Foucault affords a good example of an approach that might be modified. The ancient cynic took up a theme that underpinned ancient philosophy with the view of subverting it, ridiculing by co-option the true life or the straight life, the life that is undeviating in the pursuit of a certain logos. For respectable philosophy, the true life is indexed into a higher order. This is the life that is taught and legitimated in relation to whichever set of human, social, and civic laws a philosophy has enlightened upon and recognized as having to serve as the framework, grid, and organizing principle of the true life. For the ancient cynic, by contrast, the true life is forced to shed its attachment to higher things and is indexed to nature, a transgressive act. This made tactical sense. By pursuing the true life as other, scandalously other, the cynic questions the principles by which straightness is judged. The cynic makes tactical alliance with the so called forces of nature and pits them against every social convention he or she encounters. In modernity, however, this tactical alliance makes far less sense. Attempts to index a radical philosophy to natural forces will quickly become entangled in a complex net of signification, presided over by the human sciences. With the birth of biopolitics in the 19th century and its tightening grip on social life and political understanding, throughout the 20th, our conceptions of nature have become overburdened and potentially treacherous. Natural processes are now recruited by operations of power as a matter of routine. Our self-understanding has been subject to natural laws, and the tendencies has become, at least in part, function of statistical analysis and population control. Besides, philosophy no longer teaches a way of life, nor does it have any significant role offering social, political, and cultural console. However, however much its practitioners might choose to believe otherwise, released from regulating effects of erstwhile priesthood, a very different style of life rises to prominence, the life of pragmatic accommodations, instrumental maneuvers, and self-adjustments. In this context, the straight life of the Cynic philosopher would not function as an ironic and educational, fruitful exaggeration of a dominant mode of instruction, but would appear as if it were the product of some kind of residual dogmatism. The cynic in pursuit of the straight or true life would seem quaint, abandoning the straight life. Oh, here, let's see. It's been a pleasure, Alex, but I've got to check my bag and hit the security. Team back in. Oh, no worries, James. Go check in that bag, brother. Miss you, man. Gonna miss you a lot. Of course, all the love and joy and success your way. Um, Love you, dude. Get home safe. Yeah, if you know, it yeah, if you don't log in back in time, there's only like 2 pages left, so I'm not sure. But yes, please get home safe. Absolutely love you, man. And I'll see you soon for sure. And that's a promise. All right. Now where were we? Right. The cynic in pursuit of the straight or true life would seem quaint. Abandoning the straight life, then the cynic might instead take the dominant form of life, a life broken of broken promises and fragile ideals, and break it further, opting for the queer life, the life that is irrevocably bent, a life of gay outlaws, non-normative bodies, and abandoned futures. Though its traces are inevitably distorted and the provocation and impulses that ancient cynicism set up remain in play, these include its historic attack on the idea of education and all forms of refinement, combined with its refusal to pretend that escape is possible or social transformation meaningful without a process of sustained, embedded inquiry committed to the internal unraveling of systems it brings into question. Cynic philosophy demonstrates, by way of its imminent performed critique, how deeply the cynic remains fettered to the institution he or she questions. In this respect, cynic practice was geared as much toward a critique of the codependence of transgressive practitioner and the culture to be subverted as it was to their separation. That codependence formed the paradox. Let me sit up a little bit. Do you wanna love me? Oh my god, I can't. This drink is so bad. Jesus. You know, people go to sleep early, but not me. Holy Mother of God. Jeez Louise, bro. Mama. Bad as hell. "3D dawn is bright for me." Of transgression that the cynic attempted to work through and overcome by revealing how attempts to shed all the doubtful accoutrements of civilization would, if practiced within the society that the cynic sought to transform, only cause the deliberately improvised cynic to be even more dependent on what cynic critique derides. The highest achievement of civilized living, its kindest, most humane and beautiful procurements, remain suspect from a cynic point of view. Sentiment is everywhere, tact for its cloaked operation of power. A cynic critique is guided by its conviction that the worst excuses of civilization appear not desperate in its highest achievements, but can be located within and by way of them. With all these lessons in mind, cynicism teaches none of them. The active core of cynicism remains evasive. It is to be located and lost in the tactical suppleness, suppleness in the refusal of cynic practice to be identified with any one trait. The barrel, the farting, the free speech. Cynicism is a mode of revolt. It is the predicament of those who look about them and find everything wanting. A cynic commitment to bring to existence an other life, in Foucault's terms, is based on an unflinching critique of the life that we have, where nobody, not even the cynic, can evade its transformative, scandalizing contempt. This commitment has nothing to do with the easy phrase, another world is possible, which anyone may utter. The cynic idea of another life may be experienced only within this life as a scandal, as an offense to all standards of good taste and decency. Its alterity is felt by the offense it causes as it is gestured at, rather than argued for. The cynic does not offer arguments what that reason with themselves, that define their limits, that conclude and sum themselves up. A cynic argument begins just as it ends, abruptly and without ceremony. Ancient cynic critique does not explain exactly what it finds repellent about society. A cynic scandal does not supply the framework for understanding what informs and is ultimately intended by the cynic act. Rather, the audience supplies the framework within which the scandal takes form as such. This occurs as that audience reacts to the cynic art, mobilizing its own moral orders and economies of disgust through which it positions the cynic and adjudicates, Adju- adjudicates upon adjudicates. Upon the nature of the transgression it perceives. As we have seen, the interpretive framework will fail to adequately explain the cynic and understand why the cynic chooses to act this in this way or that way, or at least if the effect cynicism seeks to have by way of willfully bizarre, queer acts of transgression. That the cynic is conversant with the appropriate norms and standards of behavior but decides to act otherwise is the key maneuver that ensures the cynic remains incomprehensible. The audience may supply its framework of judgment, but still cannot comprehend why anyone should attempt to push its borders within explaining what it is hoping to achieve. Extend to modern cynicism and taking on a broad might claim that as a cultural phenomenon, our cynic predicament is the product of only partial dissatisfaction, that it is symptomatic of an aborted, unfulfilled nihilism. We might still wonder what a more complete, positively embraced contemporary cynic dissatisfaction would look like. Applying the logic of the ancient cynic scandal to our own times, it seems that any embrace of present day cynicism would not supply a more comprehensive or better articulated understanding or explanation of why everything is bad and why cynicism is justified. Rather, it would focus on affirming its own amorphous but sustained sense of discontent. Like the ancient cynic scandal, this is a bizarre choice of an affirmation of one's cynicism that must, to become, to some extent, remain incoherent. Why affirm your cynicism? There is no adequate answer, but like ancient cynicism, this affirmative act indicates the possibility of a different life, one that is predicted on the complete breakdown of this worldly existence, ranging from the destruction of its global economic orders of exploitation, pollution, and ecological collapse, to the radical adjustment of the its subjectivities it has to occupy and exist within. The avowed modern cynic does not hope to inspire that breakdown anytime soon, as if it would occur at all at once. in some kind of revolutionary singularity, but commits to the aggravating, inexplicable, yet transformative effect of an affirmative cynicism. It need not model itself on the open aggression and confrontational presence of the ancient cynic, which is not to say that that aggression and confrontation are ruled out. Modern cynics may opt for tactical confrontations. They may even howl once more in packs. In answer to the question, why riot? The cynic may respond, why not? This is to say, the cynic expresses indifference before the question. For the non-confrontational example of cynic practice, we might nonetheless turn to the cynical reason of late socialism, which quietly preceded and prepared for the way for the spectacular collapse of that social order. This cynic outlook is well summed up by the following anecdote. What is the difference between a Soviet pessimist and a Soviet optimist? A Soviet pessimist thinks that things can't possibly get any worse, but a Soviet optimist thinks that they will. With similar optimism, the contemporary cynic picks up where the Soviet optimism left off. The cynic expends no effort arguing that the official discourses of the educated, industrious, and politically engaged, but greets them with a glance that is blank before inspection. Unresponsive to appeal, this glance confounds power and confronts it with its failure to organize a biteable cynicism. And with that, my friends, with the drop of the Pokemon card bookmark back into the Pokemon card bookmark tin, that is the completion of Cynicism by Ansgar Allen. And that, my friends, is the conclusion of summer. Now I'm back to school. All right. Love you very much. Thank you. And I'll see you around. See you around.